Welcome to Lifestyle Solopreneur, the community for entrepreneurs who put lifestyle first. Join your host, Flavia Barris, as she interviews successful lifestyle solopreneurs and shares ideas to help you find the perfect balance between lifestyle, business, and self. Flavia is an attorney, marketing expert, and founder of several online academies. She's been featured in major media, including BBC World News, The Wall Street Journal, The New York Post, ESPN Television, and more. Join us for this episode of Lifestyle Solopreneur.
Hey, Lifestyle Solopreneurs. Today we get to speak with Bob Bernotas. He is one of the nation's top franchise consultants, and he's very passionate about helping people achieve the greatest level of satisfaction and success through franchise ownership. With years of experience guiding clients toward top-performing franchise brands, Bob provides personalized guidance and support throughout the entire process of franchise exploration. Whether you're looking for an exit strategy from corporate life or a semi-passive opportunity, Bob is here to help you find your perfect match and create a brighter future. Welcome to the show, Bob.
Thank you so much, Flavia. Great to be here.
So great to have you. And you're actually, I believe, I'm thinking back, I don't think we've had any guests who work in the franchise world. And I'm glad you're here because it's about time. I mean, it is such a huge part of business. I remember when I had a subscription to Entrepreneur Magazine, there was basically half the magazine was devoted to franchise opportunities and different businesses you can start as a franchise. So how did you end up being a franchise consultant?
Oh my goodness. Well, my background started out in franchising in general, owning franchises. So way back when, not to go too far back, but back in, I'll date myself, in 1986, I bought my first West Coast video franchise. And I'm sure you know where that industry is today, but I had a number of those, beg, borrow, and stole to get that first one open. And just purely by luck, it wasn't certainly by my skill. But that unit became the top unit in the chain. Opened in December of 1986. It was the top unit in the chain in that January, by luck, by location, whatever it might be. And that propelled me to open multiple additional West Coast video franchises. But I've owned multiple different franchise concepts that I've built and sold over the years. I've had some independent businesses. Didn't have quite the same luck with my independent businesses. I was CEO of a national franchise chain, and I have been consulting for a couple of decades now. And I'm currently a franchise investor. I own one smaller franchise, and I just bought another franchise in addition to that. So I do get high on my own supply, so to speak.
Well, for anyone who's listening, and the word franchise, you kind of are like, isn't that like a McDonald's or something would be a franchise? But tell us, what is a franchise? Boil it down, like franchise 101. Obviously, we don't have a ton of time. We could spend hours probably breaking it down. But what's the gist of it for someone who's like, hey, I've always wanted to start a business. And what is a franchise so they can conceptualize it and see if it's something they might be interested in?
Yeah, well, sure. I mean, anything that you can run a business that could be a business could potentially be a franchise. It's just that, I mean, the better franchisors, because not just any franchisor, but the better franchisors have developed models and a platform for success. They basically created the roadmap for you through their success. And basically, if you come into a franchise system, the right franchise system, it's a business in a box. I mean, everything is outlined for you. Typically, you will be, if you sign on a dotted line with a franchise company, after you've gone through the process, you've learned about them, they've learned about you, they've approved you for a franchise. First thing that happens is you're assigned a coach, and that coach is going to usher you through the process of onboarding. Eventually, you're going to go to training, and then you're ready to launch your franchise, whatever it happens to be. In the early stages, the first 6 months, first year, that coach and all the support is there to really get you up and running. Plus, there's groups of other franchisees that you will work with, share best practices. So it's an old adage, but it's actually pretty accurate. You are in business for yourself, but not by yourself. If you compare it to non-franchise types of businesses, and as I said at the very beginning, I've opened some non-franchises, and some were successful and some weren't successful. I haven't yet gotten into a franchise where I didn't achieve success, and that's simply because everything's laid out for you. You're buying into a successful business model. There was a study done by the Chamber of Commerce a bunch of years back, but they tracked a whole bunch of independent mom and pop businesses that all launched around all in the same year, and they tracked them over a 5 year period of time. Concurrently, they tracked a whole bunch of franchises, that different ones that opened all again in the same year and through that same concurrent 5 year period of time. At the end of 5 years, the independent mom and pop businesses, right around 50% were still open and operating. And Flavia, it actually surprised me it was that high. But with the franchises, 97% were still operating. Now, granted, some had turned over, meaning they were sold to someone else, another franchisee, but the vast majority of them were still in the hands of the original franchisee. So I think that kind of points to the success of a tested model versus trying to do something on your own.
Well, and a lot of people, I had someone once say, oh, no, let's not eat lunch there. That's just like a franchise restaurant. Let's go to a mom and pop. And I remember thinking, like, well, you don't know for sure that there isn't a mom and pop who owns that particular franchise restaurant. It's not just big giant corporate companies that own franchise brands out there. I mean, mom and pops get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. In most instances, if you're patronizing a franchise, you probably don't even know it's a franchise. People recognize the McDonald's of the world, the Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A, by the way, is not really a franchise. That's another story for another time. Or big brands like that. But there's so many other brands that you would not recognize at all that are actually franchises. And people also recognize the crumble cookies and maybe the orange theories. When you start to recognize a brand, usually the opportunity, at least in your market, is over. There's a reason why you're recognizing it, because it's sold in your market. So there is a certain growth pattern, a growth line with franchises, and timing is very, very important when it comes to franchising as well.
Well, because it's some of it's about territory, right? Like you want that the best spot in that new territory for that franchise, or a place that is up and coming, or you have some. And I know people who've gone to something and gone, this is the absolute best, like, X I've ever eaten or had or seen, and I would love to bring this to my hometown. And they find out it's a franchise, and they are actually able to bring that exact thing that they loved when they were on their travels to their hometown, or to where they live. I love franchising because it is, like you said, business in a box. Like, I see it like, if you've never operated a business, but you still want to be a business owner, and you have to learn and you have to create something. But if you're not already inspired to create something specific, if you're like, I just need a business, like, I don't know, I want to be a business owner, but it's not like I have this vision of this exact thing I want to do.
Right.
A franchise is kind of like the difference between sitting in front of a blank canvas with, like, some paint supplies
Mhm.
versus a paint by the number with literally a coach next to you telling you, no, that's too much paint on that paintbrush, right? It's like very guided.
Yes, and you stole my phrase. I use that all the time. But yeah, it is a paint by the numbers type of system. And you touched on something that is so very important. Territory is everything. Franchise timing is so important, because often these concepts come along, and if it's a really strong concept that might be a sexier type concept, it might be, but usually it's driven by the unit economics, how well it does financially. And if it's a really strong financial model, franchise investors tend to buy up a brand very, very quickly. They recognize that, they're astute to that, and they'll buy up multiple units and multiple territories all over the place. And then it basically shuts you out. Individual owners, shuts them out of the opportunity to get into a franchise. I mean, I just bought another franchise about 2.5 months ago. And the way this came about is one of the clients I was working with, and he was local. And I don't always have the opportunity to work with people on a local basis. I work nationally. I can work with anybody in the United States or Canada. But one of the brands I showed him is a men's health concept. He got extremely excited about it, but he disclosed to me it's going to be a stretch. It's going to be a financial stretch for him. given the fact that I love the concept, I love it's local for me, and I trusted him as a potential operator. So I raised my hand and said, John, I'll invest with you in this. And he was originally talking about 1 unit, then it quickly became 3 units. I brought in a couple other guys as well, and then we bought 6 units. But to your point, that brand was selling so quickly, we didn't even have the time to react. And we got pushed really 2 hours north into North New Jersey, and we bought 6 units up in that marketplace. But when you look at a brand like that, Flavia, it's the reason why it's selling the way it is. Number one, it's kind of a sexier brand. It's reasonably priced to get into. It's going to be in the 320K range. But the unit economics, what these things throw off is, I mean, it's a unicorn. I can't show people too many brands like this that will perform at that level.
So a lot of people have this assumption that to open a business that is a franchise, it's multi-million dollars equity and cash in the bank you need to have to get into that. But
Mhm.
I know differently, and I know you know differently. So what would you tell somebody that's like, hey, how much does it cost to become a franchisee?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, it depends upon the model. If you're looking at some of these, they're many millions of dollars, but there's lots of opportunities that are maybe a couple hundred, a couple three, $400,000, and there's lots of ways that you can leverage that. There's something called a 401k rollover or ROBS program that allows you to take money if you're eligible for it, and we'll talk about that later. But you can roll funds from a 401k or an IRA directly into a business. It has to be set up a certain way. And there's companies that help you with that, but you have no taxation, you have no penalty, you have no interest. There's always SBA. SBA is a 10-year term. The interest rates have climbed, yeah, but they will come back down. But I always counsel my clients, hey, pay it off in 2, 3, 4 years. Don't carry the interest rate for 10 years. I work with the top financing sources to the franchise industry. Rare that I can't get somebody financed. So when I'm working with a client, that's something we get very heavily into is how are you going to pay for this? But there's, again, so many things that you get into. You don't have to make a multi-million-dollar investment to have success in franchising. There's things that you can get into that'll be sub-$250,000 that'll have big upsides to them. I mean, if my clients say to me, Bob, just show me the better financial opportunities in franchising, I don't go to the real expensive ones because I can show them something like a Big Blue swim school that might be 3, 4, 5, $6 million to open, and it drops a great bottom line. But then there's things I can show them also that maybe $250,000 to get into, and then with a little bit of scaling over time, they can be exceeding what that Big Blue is doing. So it's not a question of what you spend; it's what type of franchise that you get into.
I've heard that a lot of franchisor, right? And just for terminology, everybody, franchisor would be sort of the brand, right? That's selling these opportunities. Franchisee are all the business owners that jump in and say, I want to open one of your locations. So there's a lot of them that target the military, like retired military. And I've heard it because it's like a personality type that works really well in the franchise model. Do you think there are sort of personality types of entrepreneurs that franchising is more appropriate for versus others?
Great question. And yes, military, they all look for military. Military has that structure to them. And franchise companies, they're not interested in you reinventing the wheel. So if you are a hardcore entrepreneur, I have to do everything myself. I want to create it from whole cloth. Franchising is probably not for you. If you're someone who feels, hey, I can follow instructions, I can put my own spin or style on it. Again, in business for yourself, but not by yourself, you can certainly do that. But they do not want you creating something out of whole cloth. What franchise companies look for today is they're just looking for intelligent people who have basic business acumen, have people skills, and have the financial capability to execute upon their model. If you go back 30 years ago, many of the companies out there, they were looking for something like a specific skill set. To give you an example, there's a company, and some of your listeners may know this, called CertaPro Painters. It's the largest painting franchise. There's about 1,000 franchisees around the country. Very, very successful model. mean, people were getting into it, spending $150,000 back in the day to get into it. I'm watching many of these owners sell it for a million, million and a half, $2 million in some cases, what they spent, $150,000 to get into. But back when, 35 years ago, when that brand launched, they sought out painters to become franchisees. Well, they quickly learned that painters don't make good business people. So they reset their model, and then they just started looking for people who had the capital to do it properly, and they were smart and had some basic understanding of business, and they had people skills, and then their model became wildly successful.
It's amazing. I love that story. So, as far as risks, right? Because I know some people that have been franchisees, they didn't do terribly, but it didn't go super well for them. I don't know if it's the company they partnered with or their own efforts. I didn't really want to, you never want to ask someone when they share their lament, right? Like, oh, where did you screw up? If it's not, if there's nothing I can do to help, right? So, what are the risks and when can it go sideways or go wrong? And how do you sort of guard against
Yeah, and that's a great point because look, there's like I said, there's over 4,000 different franchise concepts out there. I would suggest to you, I personally, I hate to say it about the industry, but I wouldn't go near half of them just because they're not solid models, but there's some really, really good ones out there as well. So failure typically occurs if usually there's extenuating circumstances. If it's a good model, if it's a good franchise and you follow the model, you are going to have success. If you don't follow the model, that's one scenario where it may not work. Doctors are notorious for that. I've had a lot of clients who are doctors, and sometimes they want to reinvent the wheel. But often it's illness, it's divorce, it's death, something like that occurs, and that's where most of the failures occur if it's a good system. But if done right and you follow the paint by numbers instructions, you're typically going to have a lot of success with a franchise. The One of the things that I always like to touch on with my clients is because I know a lot of your listeners are probably they have a good paying job and they don't want to walk away from that job. And people often ask me, "Hey, how can I get into a franchise but keep my full time job?" That's where semi-passive franchising comes in, and I can provide some good resources for that. But more and more franchises, especially over the last 10 years and very prevalently over the last 5, 6 years, more and more of these franchise companies have developed semi-passive models, meaning they've just developed more tools, a higher level of support, a support platform to help franchisees succeed with putting less time in it. Keep your full-time job, do something on the side. Now, depending upon the brand, it might be, 15, 20 hours a week of your time, which is going to really stretch you for a while. But as time goes on, that will become less and less. And you can make a decision at some point. Hey, this is now exceeding what my W-2 income is. Do I want to walk away? Do I want to continue with both income streams? If the opportunity is there to scale this business to a greater extent and generate a lot more income, then often people will walk away from that W-2 job.
you touched on what my next question was, which was, what's the time and effort? All business requires sometimes some effort. Is starting a franchise less or more work typically than starting any other kind of side hustle or business? I mean, are there some time savings there in your opinion, or is it the opposite?
Well, I mean, if it's a franchise versus an independent business that you may decide to start, it's going to be way less because you don't have to create something from whole cloth. And in a franchise situation, a lot of people say to me, well, why would I pay this franchise fee up front? Why would I pay this ongoing royalty fee? Well, first of all, you're buying a learning curve. Okay. You're buying into a system that they've already proven the model if you go with the right franchise. So how long would it take you to get, even if the franchise, let's say, is 5 years old, and let's say they have 100 franchises. So it's not 5 years, it's 5 years times 100, because all that data from all those franchisees are passing up to at the corporate level. And they're constantly making adjustments to their model to make their model better, to make their model more effective. So when it comes to especially the time spent in a franchise, you're not, if you get into a semi-passive model, that's one thing. If you jump into it on a full-time basis, everything will eventually become semi-passive over time, unless it's a linear model, like some type of consulting franchise where you are the product. Okay. But every other type of franchise, you're leveraging other people. And when you have the right people in place, and sometimes takes a little while to have those people in place, and your systems are nice and tight now through the franchisor, you can start backing off from the time you're spending with that franchise, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it
Hope I
makes.
answered the question.
Are there a lot of people that buy franchises, sort of start them up, stand them up, and then sell them as like a business plan? Like
Yeah.
almost not flipping exactly, but you get what I'm asking.
Most definitely. A lot of franchise investors, that's their model. Some do it and they want to stay in it long term, but most franchise investors have an exit strategy. When I'm working with a client, whether they describe to me they're looking for an exit strategy or not, that's always in the back of my mind. I want to put them in the best position to potentially sell their franchise or franchises when that time comes. But a lot of franchise investors have a 3 a 5 year plan where they want to build it to a certain extent, maximize and have a great growth curve to be able to show, and then flip that franchise. Just to give you an example, I mean, typically with an independent mom and pop business, you usually see somewhere between a 2 to 3, maybe a 4 multiple of earnings if you decide you want to sell that business. With franchises, you're usually in the 3 to 5 range of multiples, even if it's doing exactly the same numbers as that independent business. And the reason being is because you're not just selling a business, but you're selling something with an infrastructure behind it as a franchise. Okay, so that makes it more valuable to begin with, and you can trust the numbers. The buyer can trust the numbers. Often, what happens, I mean, if you're buying an independent business, and I'll give you a perfect example. So I owned a number of West Coast video franchises, and two of my franchises in Philadelphia were in between. Those two was a competitor, and that competitor happened to own three independent video stores, and two of the others were in a different part of the city. But so I approached him about buying his location. And the only reason, Flavia, I was interested in that location was because I wanted to close it. He was a competitor. I wanted to close. I knew he wasn't making money. I wanted to close it and absorb his inventory and any fixtures I could, put him in my stores, and be done with him as a competitor. So I approached him about buying his unit, and I came at him with a price. And he said, let me get back to you. About a week later, he got back to me, gave me an outlandish price. See, I already knew what he was doing. I had a couple of my employees out at different shifts just with clickers and counting heads that were coming out. I knew the business that he was doing. My point is, he was lying about what he disclosed to me. And the reason and how he did it, he was taking revenue from his other two units and putting them into that unit that he was trying to sell me. He was taking expenses from that unit and putting them into his other two units. Okay. So the numbers he was giving me was false. When you're selling a franchise or buying a franchise, you can trust the numbers. The company, the franchisor, has those numbers. So the first thing, as a potential buyer, you would approach the franchise company and say, okay, let's lay these numbers out, and look at them side by side with what the franchisee has shown me. So my point is that if you are a franchise investor, that's why franchise investors typically will position a pod. And let's say they buy, 3 or 5. They build it over a 3 or 5 year period of time, and then they sell it, and they sell it for a high multiple. Often you'll see them get into it, and they may sell it after the first year. If the trend line is really steep and you can project, because there's other franchises in the system that are doing numbers, and this is in the early stages, sometimes you see a 5, 6, 7, 8 multiple of earnings as well. Sorry to go so deep down that hole.
Oh, I love it. I could talk about this stuff all day. I find it really fascinating. There's a book called The E-Myth. It's kind of a well-known book in entrepreneurship. Basically, I mean, I don't want to boil down an entire book, but the author says, even if you have a mom and pop, I mean, he uses the example of a little pie bakery. Even if you have this like great recipe for pie, and you open up your little shop, and you're the one that's like getting up in the morning and like cleaning the counters and baking your pies and selling them. He's like, you need to actually buckle down and put in the sort of standard operating procedures and all of the employee manuals and training manuals and things that you would do as if this was franchise so that someday you can go on vacation and someone else can bake pies. And I kind of laugh because it's one of those books that everybody who is an entrepreneur probably hears about and reads and gets inspired by. But what the book is kind of telling you is the way that franchises do it is probably the best way for lifestyle and to not be pulled in 100 directions as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I love the E-Myth, by the way, and the E-Myth Revisited. You're absolutely on the mark with that. Yeah, I mean, there's so many different directions that you can go in with franchising, and there's so many opportunities. You don't have to start big. I mean, you can scale both horizontally by buying more territory, just buying more dirt. And it's cheap to do that. You don't, maybe, again, like I mentioned earlier, maybe it's 150, 200, $250,000 to buy a single franchise. Maybe that second one, maybe that third one might be $40,000 and $30,000 to buy more dirt. Now you tripled your upside, but then you have the opportunity to scale vertically in the future by adding another brand. I think that's one of the best strategies in franchising. And I see a lot of franchise investors turning to that at this point.
So tell us your role in all this. You're a consultant, you know this world inside out. You've been in it both as a consultant, but also as like the principal, right? The person doing the deal, buying the franchise. So what exactly is it you do for people, right? You're a consultant, you help them, you're sort of a matchmaker. Are you kind of a broker? Do you get paid a commission? Do people pay you hourly? Or maybe a mixture of all that, or maybe it's one-on-one or one by one, case by case. So tell us a little bit about your job and your role.
Yeah, I mean, in the past, when I first got into consulting, I would work with franchise companies often and help them position for growth. And I did work with people who simply approached me because they knew I knew a lot about franchising and asked me to be involved with helping them find the right franchise. But that morphed over the last 10 years. That's exclusively what I do at this point. But I take people through a very structured process. And by the way, they do not pay me; the franchise companies pay me. But I think it's really important to understand, despite the fact that the franchise companies compensate me for bringing qualified candidates to them to check all the boxes that they are looking for, my allegiance is to the candidates, the clients that I work with. I have no allegiance to these companies. My sole function is to make sure I help people find the right franchise fit. It does not matter to me what company they ultimately land on, as long as it's the right one for them and they're going to have success with it. So my process usually, I mean, and pretty much with anybody, if they were interested in contemplating franchise ownership and wanted to talk strategy, be happy to have a conversation. My first conversation with someone typically the Zoom call will last about 30 minutes. And I just want to learn a little bit about them. They want to learn a little bit about me. They want to learn a little bit about franchising one-on-one. Then after that, if it makes sense for us to work together, if they feel comfortable working with me, if I feel comfortable working with them, we will take the next step and I'll ask them to complete a confidential questionnaire. It takes about 20, 30 minutes, but then that gets the process started. I will do a longer consultation with them. We'll review the confidential questionnaire together. I'll have lots of questions for them. I'll answer any questions they have. Then I may float some trial balloons about different types of concepts or categories of franchising. Once I get through that step, I digest all that information, and then I go to work behind the scenes for them, and I'm looking for franchise companies that will check all the boxes that they are looking for. Once I get through that, then I will introduce those companies to them, meaning we will do another Zoom call, a little more extended one. I may lay out a half dozen franchises at that point, but I may have gone through 100, 150, 200 to get to that point, again, based on the information that they're giving me. So I may show them a half dozen franchises. We talk about it, talk about them. I answer any questions they have about them. I give you my opinion on each of them. But then I'll say at the end, tell me the 2, maybe 3 that you're most interested in. We need a place to start. We can always come back to the others. I just don't want a client to be overwhelmed by trying to investigate too many companies at a time. And then I take them through the investigation of the brand. If everything works out, we have a winner and we'll find a great franchise fit for you and I'll help you with financing. If halfway through the process, they say to me, Bob, I'm not sure franchising is right for me, then we stop. If we make it halfway through the process and I may say, Mr. Client, I'm not sure if franchising is right for you, and we will stop at that point also. But if everything works out and they are truly intent on finding a successful business, we'll do that.
Well, it must be fun to be you and to sort of have this like long client book where you can, even when you go travel, you can be like, hey, let's go eat at this location because I happen to know the person that owns it because I helped them
Right.
buy it. That's kind of fun.
Right,
So,
right. What I have a blast doing this part of the business. I never really liked working for franchisors, but this is my passion. And not that I don't make good money at it, but I mean, I make money by investing in franchises. But this is more of my passion because I get to see other people realize their dreams, have life, something that is absolutely life changing for them and gives them better quality of life, more time with their family, things of that nature.
well, I love it. How do people connect with you if they are interested in talking to you about franchising?
Simply go to my website. It is franchisewithbob.com. Pretty simple, franchisewithbob.com. If they want, they can download a free ebook I have on the website that is specifically for semi-passive franchising, and reach out to me that way, and we can talk.
Bob, you are so fascinating to speak with. And I know you have a million stories we could go through, but we don't have time for that. So I suggest if you want some of the war stories and some of the real life examples, connect with Bob and I get those one on one, especially if you are exploring this world and thinking that the world of franchising is where you want to head next. Bob, thank you so much for being on the show today. Such a great conversation. Absolutely loved it. And thank you for all that you do for all of your clients.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thanks, Flavia.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, and if you leave a review on iTunes, I promise I will read every single review. If you know someone who makes a full-time living from part-time work, and maybe this is you, please visit lifestylesolopreneur.com to nominate a guest or to nominate yourself. Because remember this, money doesn't buy happiness. But money in the hands of a happy person, there is no greater tool.
Today's episode was brought to you by the Get Shift Done program. It's a lifestyle-changing online class to help you define your business and lifestyle ambitions and to set goals in a way you've never experienced before. This class will 10x your daily productivity with methods that will blow your mind. And if you use the coupon code podcast, the class tuition is 99% off. Visit GetShiftDone.com to enroll today.